Ivy here. This week's podcast is part 3 in our 4-part series, The Cost of the Crown, The Vanishing Act, PR versus Reality. Episode 161. An introduction. Welcome to episode 3 of Behind the Facade, when the firm forgets its own. Today, we turn our focus to safeguarding, not just as a principle, but as a practice. Who is responsible for protecting the vulnerable when the institution is the one doing harm, or standing by silently while harm is being done? There are moments in recent and distant history, both documented and barely acknowledged, that suggest not every absence is temporary and not every silence is compassionate. When health becomes a secret, it can also become a weapon, not against the individual, but in defense of an image. Silence as a strategy. We've seen moments where a public figure vanishes, not because of confirmed illness, but because the truth is inconvenient. Public duties are cancelled. No photos, no updates, no family visits, and no concern from the institution beyond a few vague sound bites. That is not care. That is containment. And if this were any other employer, it would raise safeguarding alarms. A key message through these last few lines, and definitely for the remainder of this podcast: in silence, we hear a strategy. One that protects the institution, not the person. Suspicious events. Official denials. There have been a few incidents over the years, certainly in recent years, and within that cluster of incidents, some of them, including the last one that we know of, involving emergency flashing lights, emergency services dashing through the streets, and claims that didn't align with what witnesses captured. Many witnesses on film, on various social media platforms, with their footage. People saw what they saw. Footage exists. No statement can ever erase that. Then, surprise, surprise, when it's clear that there are lots of people with footage, then suddenly health updates start flowing. Conditions are named. Treatments are floated. Public sympathy is directed. But nothing is ever quite verified. Needless to say, a story built on ambiguity serves one purpose, and that is to protect power. Our key message in this section: illness becomes the perfect shield because it deflects both accountability and questions. The control over care. The royal family like and prefer to refer to themselves as the firm, and yet there are so many legal requirements of any other business within the United Kingdom, but yet the firm is exempt from over 160 of them. The lack of a safeguarding policy, or if there is one, it's clearly a major secret because I've never come across it, and I am not the only one. The lack of a safeguarding policy in the royal structure, such as grace and favour housing, a number of elderly people working way past retirement, and no HR oversight. And as someone who comes from an HR background, I do wonder what the purpose of that team is. Some of these elderly members of the firm, in fact, quite a worrying number of people that look frail. Some vanish for a while and then reappear. Some show clear signs of emotional or psychological deterioration. But the mantra appears to be, the show must go on. In private settings, i.e. any other business, these would be safeguarding red flags. But in the firm, it's tradition. Key message for this section: when no one steps in, it's not a failure. It's a system working as intended. More information, by the way, in the article. I'm just running through a summary of the sections there. These are anonymous quotes from a handful of people. There are many organisations out there working with other groups, all of whom are trying to assist in any way that they can. Within that framework, there are many people who have been on the receiving end of one or more types of domestic violence. Here are some of the quotes from a variety of sources that are listed in the reference sources at the end of the article, but also if you explore further on any of the websites for these organisations working in this field, there are even more. Very, very powerful, very educational. and hopes to increase understanding. Sometimes the signs aren't medical, they're psychological. Having worked with victims of domestic violence and having experienced some of it myself, I know the signs: isolation, emotional volatility, sudden disappearances, noticeable weight or posture changes, unspoken fear. No institution built on control can ever truly support victims, because victims disturb the script. And for anyone who is viewing a wide range of organisations that they may have concerns about in terms of safeguarding, or any of you that watch the Royals, the firm as they like to be known as, the key message for this particular section around that: you don't need confirmation. You just need to see what's in front of you. We are told this structure is built on service. But if those closest to the Crown are not protected, not respected, not safe, then who exactly are they serving? Perhaps the next generation will ask the same question, not with deference, but with demands. There are more than a handful of British royal family members who are far from well, and even they are not given a break. Remember the photo of all the royals, and one poor lady had to be held up either side of her because she was unable to stand on her own. No wheelchair or any type of aid in sight, as if that was an embarrassment, as I am pretty sure she did not walk to position herself for the photo. It is wrong. Metaphorically wheeling members of the British royal family out for photo ops, but ensuring that no visible sign of walking aids are in sight. This has been the case for as long as I can remember. It implies stigma, and or if one is a member of the monarchy, no one should be seen as less than in a perfect state. Yet, if the physical signs are there that something is not quite right, that person or people will be hidden from view until the image is no longer visible. And as a reminder, this isn't about naming names. None of these 4 podcasts is about that. It is about naming the behaviour. For those who've worked with domestic abuse survivors or lived through it quietly, the signs are rarely loud. They are subtle. Isolation, sudden shifts, silence, visible strain, a flicker of something unspoken. Those who've seen it before recognise it. You don't need confirmation, you just know. Phrases used in some of the podcast slides that you will see in the video podcast for this episode And you will definitely see a summary of them in the final part, in part 4. Each one providing much food for thought in the silence that follows each statement shown on those slides. When someone disappears and no one asks why, that is not tradition. That is control. You can't claim to protect the nation if you won't protect your own. If safeguarding only applies to some, it applies to none. They say it's about service, but what kind of service demands silence, suffering, and sacrifice? The less they tell us, the more they reveal. This isn't about one person. It's about what the system does to anyone who becomes inconvenient. Let's have a quick foray through the safeguarding framework, just to keep a reminder for you as to what this framework of these 4 episodes is about. Safeguarding isn't just for schools and care homes. It is a core responsibility for all organisations. It's about creating a safe environment for everyone involved, your employees, customers, and any vulnerable individuals your business interacts with. This comprehensive guide will equip you with the knowledge and steps to implement a robust safeguarding policy within your company. And I'll just point out here that this quick summary that I'm doing, obviously there is a much more detailed set of requirements per each of the sections, but the website is absolutely full of all of this because that's the nature of their business, and I highly recommend that you save at least one of those links that you will find on the website to do with safeguarding, and just keep it as a record for something to refer to if you need to in the future. Understanding safeguarding. Safeguarding encompasses protecting individuals, particularly children and vulnerable adults, from harm. This harm can be physical, emotional, sexual, or neglectful. By creating a culture of safety and awareness, you can minimize the risk of abuse and ensure a positive experience for everyone involved. The safeguarding process. Here's a breakdown of the key elements to consider when building your safeguarding framework, and also to keep in mind that we are looking here at the firm as an organisation. Policy development. A well-defined safeguarding policy forms the foundation of your efforts. The policy should clearly outline the following: the company's commitment to safeguarding, definitions of abuse and neglect, roles and responsibilities of staff in safeguarding, procedures for identifying and reporting concerns, access and reporting procedures for customers if applicable, disciplinary measures for breaches of policy. Risk assessment. Identify potential safeguarding risks specific to the firm. This might involve the nature of the work, clientele, or the environment you operate in. Regular risk assessments ensure your policy remains relevant and effective. Training and awareness. Equip your staff with the knowledge and skills to recognise signs of abuse and neglect. Training should cover topics like recognising different types of abuse, safeguarding procedures within the firm, communication techniques to talk to someone who might be at risk, reporting and escalation protocols, confidentiality and information sharing. Record keeping. Maintain clear and concise records of your staff's credentials, criminal records, checks, and so on. These records should be stored securely and in accordance with data protection laws. Our packages can support an organisation of any size in a safe, secure and efficient manner. And when I say our packages, I'm referring to the company, the organisation that set out this summary of requirements, who you will find listed, as per usual, in the reference sources at the end of the article. Another one, I'm skipping through them, so I'm not reading every single one that's listed here. This one is collaboration and communication. Maintain open communication throughout the organisation about safeguarding policies and procedures. Engage with relevant external agencies to ensure a coordinated approach to safeguarding. This is the last section I'll quote in terms of the framework for safeguarding. I may refer to the odd line in the next few minutes, but basically this is the last section I'm going to read out as such. Building a safeguarding culture. Creating a safeguarding culture goes beyond policies and procedures. It's about fostering an environment where staff and customers feel comfortable raising concerns and reporting suspected abuse. Here's how to achieve this. Open communication, leadership, commitment, listening and taking action, promoting well-being. Each of those headings has its own separate paragraph. I've just read out the headings. And at all times as I'm going through this, yes, obviously think of organisations where you work, that you know of, but in terms of this podcast, we're looking at the firm. Demonstrating safeguarding credentials to customers, clients who visit the organisation. Transparency is key to building trust with your customers. Our view is the best way you can show your customers that your staff are safe. They can see it for themselves, and your staff do not need to continually carry their hard copy documents with them. Publish safeguarding policy on your website and make it easily accessible. Display safeguarding accreditation logos or certificates, which includes the use of logo of any client that you are in business with. Include information about your safeguarding procedures in customer-facing documents. Train customer-facing staff to answer questions about safeguarding practices. As I said, there's a lot more within the article and even more in the reference sources. I'm moving on now to coercive control, a particular topic that I've written about before. I've done 2 full podcasts of this, particularly in the early days when I started off the SG UK channel. And I'm going to go through Again, summarising what's written here in the article, and then I will go on to speak briefly about Laura Richards, who was featured in both of those two previous podcasts, and is someone who I hope to do a joint podcast with at some point in the future. Maybe a way off, because she's extremely busy and also travelling at various parts of the world, doing a lot of brilliant work. But getting back to this section, coercive control, a summary. Here's a look at 12 major signs of coercive control, along with some resources that can help anyone get out of a bad situation. They are listed in the article, but I'll only read out the headings of the 12. These are the signs to look out for with people that you know, that you come across, or any organisation that has staff and a decent HR team would also have information around this, because you look at the signs, the behaviour, and you pick up certain vibes, if you like, that something is not quite right. So this now is not just the firm, it's about coercive control and how that impacts on people. Whether they are colleagues, friends, relatives, these are the signs to look out for. So as I said, isolating you from your support system. A controlling partner will try to cut you off from friends and family or limit contact with them, so you don't receive the support you need. Monitoring your activity throughout the day. Abusers pursue coercive control through attempts to make themselves omnipresent. Denying you freedom and autonomy. Someone exerting coercive control might try to control your freedom of movement and independence. Gaslighting. The abuser must always be right, and they will force the victim to acknowledge this. They manipulate, lie, and gaslight to get their way and convince you that you are wrong. Name-calling and putting you down. Malicious put-downs, name-calling, and frequent criticism are all forms of bullying behaviour. Limiting your access to money. Controlling finances in a way of restricting your freedom and ability to leave the relationship. Reinforcing traditional gender roles. Turning your children against you. If you have children, either with the abuser or someone else, they may try to weaponize the children against you by telling them that you are a bad parent or belittling you in front of them. Controlling aspects of your health and body. They'll monitor and control how much you eat, sleep, or time you spend in the bathroom. Making jealous accusations. Regulating your sexual relationship. And finally, threatening your children or pets. Each of those headings, as I said, has got a separate paragraph underneath with more detail, and even that is a summary from the main document. And I will say here about those 12 headings in trying to control an individual. I can think of more than one throughout history and also in modern times, within the 1,000-year plus history of the monarchy, where those 12 headings have definitely been used against people who didn't quite fit in. And we'll leave it at that. And the fact that I can say over 1,000 years, those are the ones that they've written about. So heaven help the ones that didn't even get that far. There are a number of them throughout history, particularly women, who are treated that way. How to get out. Coercive control is a pernicious form of domestic abuse that entraps you in a hostage-like situation. Regardless of the history with your abuser, even if it included some happy moments, you don't deserve this treatment. Getting out of an abusive relationship can be complex, even more so when children are involved. But with a bit of planning, you can make a safe exit from the situation. Again, I'm just going to read out headings of these next few sections. Maintain communication with your support system whenever possible. Call a domestic violence hotline regularly. Practice how to get out safely and practice often. Have a safety plan. Some people working within family businesses can be unfortunate to receive this type of behaviour from more than one individual. The legislation around coercive control now includes that the abusers can be more than one person, and it includes groups, and it also includes family groups. Building a culture of safeguarding is a continuous process. By regularly reviewing your policies, procedures and training, you can ensure your organisation remains a safe haven for everyone. Remember, safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. Working together, creating a safer world for all. A small extract here about Laura Richards, the consultant and the behavioural analyst that I have referred to, as I said early on, in the podcast series for SG UK, but also I remain so impressed with her range of projects around the world. She definitely is an expert in this field. So those of you who have been with me since 2021, when I first began this series of podcasts, know that when it comes to coercive control, I support the work of Laura Richards. Laura worked for a while in Scotland Yard as a behavioural analyst and has gone on now to consultancy globally, and is also a successful author and highly respected in the industry. As I said earlier, one day I would love to do a podcast with her. It may take a while, but I am confident it will happen one day. What is coercive control? Coercive control is a strategic pattern of behaviour designed to exploit, control, create dependency, and dominate. The victim's everyday existence is micromanaged, and the space for action as well as potential as a human being is limited and controlled by the abuser. Initially, love bombing and charm may occur to get the victim into the relationship. Gaslighting, isolation, economic control, and financial abuse, and rules and regulations are gradually introduced over time once the victim is emotionally invested as well as a consequence if they are broken. The rules apply to the victim rather the perpetrator creating a double standard, and the victim fears the consequence if she or he breaks a rule. It is generally female, but not only. Over time, coercively controlling behaviour erodes the victim's sense of self, their confidence and self-esteem, agency and autonomy. The abuser creates an unreal world of contradiction, confusion and fear. Moreover, 51% of victims do not even know that they are being abused, manipulated and controlled. Coercive control correlates significantly to serious harm, femicide, homicide, familicide and suicide. A number of feminist psychologists in the 1970s identified the domestic abuse victims that they worked with as living like hostages and coined the term coercive control. This dangerous form of abuse relies on a range of behaviours or actions that can be very subtle and nuanced. The intention is to exploit and dominate and to ultimately deprive the victim of their most basic rights and needs. Over time, the victim may lose the very essence of being, the sense of who they are, their likes and dislikes, rendering their needs and desires irrelevant. Hence hostage-taking and living under an enforced regime. There are definitely a few high-profile people in various parts of the world who I just know match so many of these indicators. Make of that what you will. It can be the victim or the abuser. The behaviours can be very different in each case because it depends on the victimology. It's very idiosyncratic to the victim and tailor-made as a plan to target them, and it can happen to anyone. These behaviours can include strategies such as pseudo-caring tactics that appear to be attentive and thoughtful, while in reality the perpetrator is actually just micromanaging the victim and limiting their space for action. They may appear super attentive and into the victim in the beginning, but all the while they may be social engineering and data mining and storing up information about the intended victim or creating an atmosphere of codependency. When we understand coercive control, it's really about a power imbalance, entrapment, and utter domination. Psychological issues leading to mental health issues. How can any business be truly successful and have a safe environment if the law does not have to be followed and scrutiny is poor or non-existent? If there is no legal scrutiny and a business can volunteer to pick and choose record keeping and are never challenged why some things are in place, it places all the people who work or live in that environment to be at risk. And the final few lines, which is a closing slide quote. And the quote is 2 lines and then a statement underneath. There is a kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. It means something happened, and no one wants to say what. And the underlying statement, and the longer the silence lasts, the louder the questions become. That is the end of our third part in a series of 4. I hope you found that useful and of interest, and I hope that you can think of people and situations in any walk of life, as I said, where you work, or people that you know that work in certain places, as well as, in this case, the firm. It doesn't matter, it's about recognising the symptoms and the signs, and being able, if you come across such a thing, to point people in the direction of some of the organisations that are quoted in the reference sources, and many, many more on websites. So, as per usual, I look forward to reading your comments and your thoughts, not names. We're looking at patterns of behaviour here, and I think there's an abundance that have come out of this episode in particular about behaviours, and that's all that we are going to be vocally, publicly talking about, is patterns of behaviour. But I hope, and I believe, that it will be extremely useful for you to have some of these in the back of your mind when you see certain things appear, whether it be on TV or otherwise, that you start to make linkages about patterns of behaviour and elements of coercive control. So, at the end, as I said, so it's bye from me, bye from Ivy, bye.